In the heart of Kinjara City, towering skyscrapers and glistening storefronts lined the immaculate boulevards that led toward the exclusive district of Everson Heights, a neighborhood where power was currency and influence was expected as casually as the morning sun. At the center of this lavish enclave stood Crystal & Crown, a high-end supermarket renowned for its imported fresh produce and spiraling prices. Its facade, made entirely of reflective glass, showcased an interior so pristine that one might mistake it for a futuristic art gallery. Most customers who passed through its automatic doors arrived in chauffeur-driven cars or sleek electric vehicles, wearing tailored suits or flowing gowns that declared their membership in the city's elite. That day, however, Christopher Kalu arrived alone, on foot, wearing a plain navy shirt and well-worn khaki pants. He was not accompanied by aides or bodyguards, and there was no official council pin on his collar. Even though he was indeed a rising member of the Kinjara City Council, unknown to most, Christopher had spent long nights drafting legislative proposals aimed at accountability in local governance, tackling the kind of systemic issues that were rarely discussed in posh grocery aisles. He carried a simple canvas bag that read, "Dignity has no price," words he had picked up years ago from a youth rally in the outskirts of the metropolis. He did not come here to make a scene. He wanted only to purchase some fresh fruit for his father, who was recovering from surgery. But as soon as he walked inside, Christopher felt the weight of curious, guarded eyes. A hush settled in the produce section where a woman in designer heels froze mid-conversation on her phone. A couple, both dressed in subtle embroidered robes, slowly steered their cart away as if to distance themselves from a perceived threat. And though no one said a word outright, Christopher recognized the unspoken tension in the air. He had grown up on the other side of the city, in an area seldom visited by Everson Heights residents, and he understood all too well the coded signals of discomfort. Still, he maintained his composure, gliding his cart toward the row of glimmering apples and pineapples bathed under LED spotlights. He picked up a pineapple, checking for ripeness. 2 aisles away, a man in a crisp uniform bearing the insignia of Kinjara's private security force stood next to another guard, their gazes fixed squarely on Christopher. It was as though the supermarket's music, some classical composition playing softly overhead, receded into the background, replaced by the pounding of his own heartbeat. Christopher, holding the pineapple, took in a measured breath. He had seen this before, perhaps not so openly, but certainly in the glances of certain officials who assumed he was overstepping by occupying a council seat. It was that old question, how did someone like you make it in here? He placed the fruit in his canvas bag, turned to inspect the stacked oranges, and felt the hairs on his neck stand on end when he realized the 2 guards had grown closer. "Excuse me," one of them said, voice low but charged with an implied threat. "We've had reports of a loiterer in this section. Mind explaining why you've been pacing here without making a purchase?" Christopher flashed a gentle smile. "I'm simply selecting produce. Didn't realize browsing was a crime." He tried to keep his voice cordial. The other guard, heavier set and older, smirked. "We'd like to see some identification, just to be certain everything is in order." The older guard's request was not a polite question. It was an order. Christopher felt his stomach churn. Though he had a Council Idaho in his wallet, he did not want to flash it right away. He wanted to see how far they intended to push him, to witness how deeply the prejudice ran when they assumed he was just another unwelcome visitor, an interloper in their manicured realm. So he slid out his regular driver's license and handed it over. The guard hardly glanced at it before looking at Christopher's face with hardened suspicion. "What were you doing exactly?" demanded the second guard, who rolled his shoulders as though preparing for a confrontation. "Comparing prices?" Christopher replied lightly. "Is that prohibited in your establishment?" The older guard leaned in, face close enough that Christopher smelled the hints of menthol gum on his breath. "Listen, friend, we've had theft issues lately. You fit a certain profile, so I suggest you cooperate fully, unless you'd like to spend the day at District Police Station 7. At that moment, the store manager glided over, a slim, formally dressed woman whose name tag read Manager E. Kavea. She stood with carefully concealed unease, her eyes flicking from the guards to Christopher, as if trying to gauge which side would cause her less trouble. "We've had multiple guests mention your suspicious behavior," she said softly, as if a gentle tone could soften the gravity of what was happening. "We just want to ensure the safety of our patrons." Christopher's mind raced. Safety from what? From a man in a simple shirt trying to buy fruit? He resisted the urge to raise his voice. He was too familiar with the ways a calm protest could be twisted into aggression. Before he managed to reply, the older guard abruptly grabbed Christopher's wrist. In that moment, Christopher dropped the pineapple. It thudded on the polished floor, rolling into the corner. "Don't resist," warned the guard, twisting Christopher's arm behind his back. A few shoppers paused behind the glimmering aisles but quickly turned away, feigning interest in the aisles of cheeses and chocolates. The store's background music continued in its genteel swirl, making the contrast of the violence that much more surreal. Christopher felt his pulse spike as he mustered. "You assaulted me before I even said a word. This is unnecessary force." The older guard tightened his grip. "Think very carefully before saying another word." The younger guard smirked, retrieving a set of handcuffs from his belt. A hush covered the store, and Christopher glanced around for any sympathetic face. None came forward. Some bystanders were too afraid. Others probably believed the false narrative unfolding. He felt the cold metal snap around his wrists, the biting pinch of steel, and he closed his eyes momentarily, reining in a roiling surge of anger. He was no stranger to these tactics, but it was still horrifying to be treated like a criminal, right in the open, for no reason beyond an assumption about who belonged and who did not. As they led Christopher away, one voice rang out from the far side of the aisle. "Hey, what's going on here?" A teenage girl in a simple t-shirt had raised her phone to record. The guards glared at her, but she took a shaky step backward and continued filming. Christopher managed to catch her eye. There was something in her silent nod that said, "I won't pretend I didn't see this." But the store manager quickly moved to block her view, and the guards frog-marched Christopher through the front doors, into the blazing, mid-morning sun of Everson Heights. The injustice of it all screamed inside him, yet he did not resist. If you're feeling stunned or outraged right now, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're reading from. Because sometimes the truth gets buried if we don't speak up, and each voice matters. The private security car delivered Christopher to District Police Station 7 without lights or sirens. For all the drama, they were oddly subdued, as if they felt confident no consequence would come of this. Station 7 was notorious among grassroots activists. Rumors claimed evidence went missing. Wrongful arrests were spun into legitimate misunderstandings, and those in power conveniently washed their hands of any wrongdoing. The building itself was a squat, brutalist relic from colonial times, painted a drab gray that seemed to absorb all light. The swirling rumors had never quite reached official channels because no one had brought forward a case that stuck. When Christopher stepped out of the security vehicle, still handcuffed, an officer on duty barely glanced at him. He simply opened the heavy metal door leading to the corridor of holding cells. Inside, flickering fluorescent bulbs created a perpetual twilight effect, revealing peeling paint and water-stained ceilings. A damp, musty odor hung in the stale air, as if it were a world apart from the sparkling district outside. They shoved Christopher toward an old wooden bench, where the older guard removed the cuffs long enough for a gruff officer to reapply a fresh pair behind his back. "We'll just keep him here until the station commander shows up," the guard muttered to the officer, who nodded disinterestedly. Christopher held his tongue, even though the interior logic of the place disgusted him. The guard rummaged through Christopher's pockets, pulling out a phone, wallet, and keys, dropping them unceremoniously into a plastic bag. Christopher clenched his jaw. He realized how precarious his situation was. District Police Station 7 had been named in countless allegations but never punished. Victims' testimonies vanished, security footage malfunctioned, and any official who tried to pry deeper found themselves reassigned or threatened. Sitting there with his wrists bound, Christopher thought about the countless individuals who had passed through these walls, receiving no justice, no voice, no recourse. every inch of this place whispered that no one would believe him if he spoke up. He was just another body to process, another file to rubber stamp and bury. The station commander arrived after nearly 2 hours, a short, balding man named Commander Mose with wrinkles etched by cynicism rather than age. He made a show of glancing at the incomplete report. Caught loitering, possible intent to shoplift, resisting security. Mose read out the fabricated charges with a bored tone. Christopher felt his chest tighten. Shoplift? He never even walked near an exit with unpaid goods. Mose's eyes flickered at Christopher. Your name is Kalu, correct? Occupation. Christopher swallowed, resolved to keep his calm. I'm a council member for the city of Kinjara. Mose let out a brief snort. That right? And I'm the queen of the coast. You expect me to believe that? You have no official badge, no council pin, nothing but this rag of a shirt. Christopher sensed this was precisely how they'd strong-arm him, mock his credibility, treat him like a joke. But he reminded himself that a direct confrontation might play into their hands. He needed a better strategy. The corridor beyond the interrogation room was alive with phone calls and low murmurs. He glimpsed the same guard from the supermarket speaking into his mobile. Yes, sir, everything's being handled. No ID on him. We'll keep him locked in until the reports are finalized. District Magistrate Oromo is ready to sign off if it goes to court. The guard's tone carried a brazen confidence, the kind that came when you believed the entire chain of authority would back you up. Christopher closed his eyes, letting their arrogance reveal how deep the corruption spread. This had gone beyond a random arrest. They were speaking directly to a magistrate known for dismissing allegations against the station. Christopher's shoulders ached from attention, but his mind churned with possibilities. He decided the time for caution was over. Someone needed to know. He had only one call to make, one that might shift every dynamic. Unbeknownst to the guards, Christopher had memorized an emergency code that would trigger a secure line to his older brother, Obesai Kalu, the justice minister of the entire country. Not many knew that Councilman Christopher was the younger sibling of a man with near unprecedented legal authority, and not many realized that Christopher had deliberately kept this relationship quiet, believing in proving himself on his own merits. Now, faced with a system determined to bury him, he saw no choice but to break that silence. Waiting for a moment when the corridor was empty, he mustered the nerve to speak. Commander, am I not entitled to a phone call? Mose smirked. A phone call, eh? You watch too many crime dramas, son. This isn't the West, but we'll see. With feigned indifference, he gestured to a dusty landline on a desk. He imagined Christopher would try calling some friend or a random lawyer, who would be equally powerless. He never suspected that Christopher possessed any serious connection. Make it quick, Mose said, then turned to bark orders at a clerk. Christopher's fingers, still trembling with adrenaline, dialed *9, followed by a code that only top officials would recognize. It rang once, twice. Yes, who's this? A crisp voice answered, hinting at authority. It's Christopher, he whispered, heart pounding as he glimpsed Commander Mose eyeing him. Chris, where are you? The urgency in Obesai's tone flared instantly. I'm being held at District Police Station 7, Christopher replied. They don't believe who I am, and they're forging claims of shoplifting. It's all connected. Magistrate Oromo, the commander, maybe even the mayor. I overheard them referencing cover-ups. There was a pause, so thick it could have snapped from the tension. Then Obesai said, hold on. I'll handle this. Don't let them provoke you. The line went dead. Christopher gently placed the receiver down, feeling a wave of both relief and lingering worry. He knew his brother would shake the earth if he had to, but District Police Station 7 was infamous for a reason. The question was how much damage they might try to do before Obesai's intervention arrived. A shiver ran through Christopher's spine. Now he had only to wait, watch, and absorb every detail he might need to prove the wrongdoing. Meanwhile, in the Justice Ministry's towering building across the city, Obesai Kalu paced his expansive office, phone clutched in his hand. He had faced down major scandals before, even forced resignations of high-ranking officials. But this was personal. The smell of leather-bound law books and freshly polished floors no longer comforted him. He felt only the simmer of anger that someone dared subject his brother to an ordeal built on prejudice and corruption. He summoned his entire investigative team, barking rapid-fire instructions. "I want all station logs from District 7 going back 5 years. Dig up every complaint, every internal affairs report, any sealed court documents that reference Oromo or the station commander. And get me a direct line to the Executive Council. If local officials are part of this cover-up, we're about to clean house." Within an hour, black SUVs with tinted windows roared out of the Justice Ministry's underground parking, carrying federal investigators, forensic analysts, and special agents. Their destination, District Police Station 7. By mid-afternoon, the typically quiet station parking lot was clogged with unmarked vehicles, uniformed federal officers, and media vans that had caught wind of an unfolding siege. Commander Mose stood behind his cracked office blinds, peering down at the chaos. His face had turned ashen. "Who authorized all this?" he spluttered, tossing a panicked glance at the older guard who had arrested Christopher. The guard had no answer, only stammering. Soon, a stern-faced federal agent in a navy blue uniform marched up the station steps and declared that the premises were under federal scrutiny, brandishing documents that spelled out sweeping search warrants. From the second floor, an officer tried to shut down the security cameras, only to find them forcibly overridden by the federal team's technical experts. Documents, computers, storage drives, all were confiscated on the spot. The corridors echoed with the sound of rummaging, computer fans spinning up as digital forensics specialists copied entire databases. One by one, officers who had once acted with such brazen confidence found themselves in handcuffs, read their rights, and led away for interrogation. Commander Mose tried to slip out a rear exit, but was promptly blocked by 2 federal agents. "Commander Mose, you are under arrest for unlawful detention, conspiracy to commit evidence tampering, and multiple counts of orchestrating wrongful arrests. Place your hands behind your back." Mose stuttered protests, insisting on some misunderstanding, but his words fell flat in the face of the official orders. Meanwhile, Christopher, who had been sitting silently in the dank holding cell, heard the commotion outside. The door suddenly opened, revealing a uniformed federal officer. "Christopher Kalu," she said softly, unlocking his cuffs. "You're free to go. On behalf of this investigation, I apologize for everything." As the handcuffs fell away, Christopher rubbed his wrists, relief washing through him. Yet more than relief, he felt a sharp resolve. He had witnessed how quickly an innocent man could be dehumanized, and it crystallized his determination to see accountability enforced, not just in Station 7, but across the city. The officer led him through the corridors. He saw the older guard who had first grabbed him pinned against a wall, hands cuffed. The guard glared, but it was a glare of helpless fury. Outside, the bright daylight dazzled Christopher's eyes as he stepped onto the station's front steps. Obasai stood there, arms folded. The media's cameras pivoted to capture the reunion. For a moment, brother and brother locked eyes, no words needed. Christopher bowed his head slightly, grateful beyond measure. Obasai simply nodded, guiding Christopher away from the cluster of reporters. At that exact moment, a junior correspondent holding a microphone rushed up, shoving it toward them. "Councilman Kalu, do you have any statement on your detention and the subsequent federal raid? Is it true you're related to the Justice Minister?" Christopher, glancing around, realized the entire city was about to discover what had happened, how a routine visit to buy fruit had exploded into a national scandal. He took a measured breath, looked straight into the camera, and said, "No statement yet, but I want to say this. Discrimination should never be a normal part of life. Whether you're a student, a shop worker, a teacher, or a council member, you deserve respect. And if you agree, if this story moves you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about making real change." Then he gently guided his brother away from the cameras. Over the coming weeks, an unprecedented legal storm broke across Kinjara City, in what the press named the Purge of Station 7. Dozens of officers faced indictments for misconduct and evidence tampering. The station's arrest logs were exposed to be riddled with questionable cases, most often targeting individuals of certain ethnic or economic backgrounds. Magistrate Oromo, who had greenlit so many suspicious warrants, was suspended and later charged for unethical collusion. Most explosive of all was the involvement of high-profile politicians, the mayor rumored to have turned a blind eye to the station's activities for political gain, the police commissioner, who had accepted bribes in the guise of administrative fees. Each was named in the investigation, culminating in mass resignations and a citywide call to restructure law enforcement. Oversight. By the time the trials began, the people of Kinjara were riveted. Every major news outlet covered the hearings, in which Christopher testified in excruciating detail about the humiliating moments in that upscale supermarket, the quick escalation of prejudice, and the cold routine with which Station 7 processed people they considered beneath the law. He recounted the guards' words, the manager's complicity, and the systematic way District Police Station 7 forged documents. Video evidence came from phone recordings, some from that teenage girl in the supermarket, and more from a newly discovered set of footage hidden on an officer's personal device. As the evidentiary net widened, unstoppable momentum forced the mayor, the police commissioner, and multiple high-ranking officials into the defendant's dock. In a packed courtroom, presided over by a special tribunal from the nation's highest bench, sentences rained down with uncharacteristic harshness for such powerful figures. The ex-mayor received 15 years for abetting the violation of civil rights, the commissioner 18 years for orchestrating bribery and cover-ups, and Magistrate Oromo 20 years for abusing judicial authority and willfully concealing evidence. The guards who had manhandled Christopher were handed prison terms that ranged from 5 to 10 years. Commander Mose, found guilty of leading a conspiracy to systematically target vulnerable communities, was sentenced to 25 years. Assets linked to their misconduct, lavish homes, fancy cars, offshore accounts, were seized by court order, later redistributed through a newly established Victims' Restoration Fund. The day that final verdict arrived, Christopher stood outside the courthouse, confronted by a sea of news microphones. Instead of reveling in a personal victory, he pressed his hands together and addressed the city. Justice is not about punishing a few. It's about dismantling a culture of impunity that has haunted us for too long. And we're only getting started. The crowd roared with applause, and people waved signs proclaiming respect for all and end corruption now. Among the onlookers was the teenage girl who had filmed that first moment in the supermarket. Their eyes met briefly, and Christopher offered her a grateful nod. Her footage had been the first crack in a shield of silence. In the months that followed, District Police Station 7 was officially decommissioned. The aging concrete edifice that had once swallowed so many innocents was stripped, repainted, and converted into the Hope and Dignity Community Center. Where interrogation rooms once stood, there were now computer labs offering free legal resources and vocational training. Community meetings replaced court hearings, with activists and local leaders brainstorming ways to prevent any station from ever degenerating into a tool of oppression again. On opening day, Christopher toured the new facility. Instead of bulletproof glass and barred cells, sunlight poured in through tall windows. A mural in the main hall depicted diverse hands clasped together, with the inscription, "Power unshared is power misused." Children roamed the space, learning about their rights, their voices echoing where once only hushed threats resounded. One child asked Christopher, "Is it really over?" Christopher knelt to meet the boy's curious gaze.